Should the United States embrace an explicitly Christian governance in our law and Constitution? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Last night, the debate on Christian governance in the United States blew up. We're going to talk about what such governance would really look like, which is not what its detractors want you to think it would look like. Before I go into detail, I want to shout out to the sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of good merchandise there, including this t-shirt. Look at this. The more I study science, the more I believe in God. Unquote, Albert Einstein. Yes, he really did say that. Now, back to the debate and how it blew up. On Rachel Maddow's TV show, Ms. Rachel Maddow, who is still trying to keep her show relevant, attacked something she called Christian nationalism. She also attacked the site gab.com and its affiliated sites. Now, anyone watching her segment will see at once what her real quarrels are. She loves Barack Obama's idea of the curatorial function of the mainstream media. By her logic, she wants certain accredited social platforms to kick people off them. Then she named several classes of people she would like to see kicked off. Now, some of them, even I have a quarrel with. But she's trying to ascribe guilt by association to the rest. The names of the people she doesn't want to see on social media don't matter. Even the specific event context does not matter. What matters is that she has no respect for freedom of speech or the press. Now, for everyone's information, if you're dealing, for example, with someone trying to suppress unpleasant historical memories, you don't try to suppress them. If you do that, people will say, maybe he's right, and what are you afraid of? No. You let them express their opinions, however outrageous, with complete freedom, subject to the law against threats, and then you refute those opinions just as freely if you can. Now, as I said, Rachel Maddow does not respect freedom of speech or of the press. She has no respect either for Christian precepts or for American patriotism. I don't think she respects anyone's patriotism nor loyalty to any system but the globalist system. And for that reason, she wants to suppress Christianity and patriotism. And to that end, she coins or repeats that phrase, Christian nationalism. Obviously, she's trying to evoke memories of the nationalist, socialist, German Workers' Party. Others of her persuasion have invoked memories of Benito Mussolini's fascists. Never mind that these two parties ran on government control of industry, which is not a Christian value. The Rachel Maddows of this world love to identify their enemies with the German-Italian Axis during the Second World War. And whose law did I just invoke? Oh, come now, you know this one. Godwin's Law, of course. Now, in fact, Christian governance does not mean Christian nationalism, or at least I would prefer not to use that term. To be a Christian is to be a citizen of God's kingdom, not necessarily of any particular civilization or nation state. Christian civilizations and civilizational states can and should be allies. But to imply that only one country can have all the true Christians in it is profoundly mistaken. Now, happily, I don't have to respond directly to Rachel Maddow's tirade. Andrew Torba, the head of GAB, has already done that. I've left a link in the description to his response, so you can go watch it on GAB TV. As I said, I'll let Andrew Torba defend himself. What I want to do here is to discuss what Christian governance really means and why America should strive for it. Let's go back to October 11th, 1798, to then-President John Adams' letter to the Massachusetts militia. I've left a link in the description. You've likely heard me quote just a couple of sentences from it before. Well, now I'm going to quote many more. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation, or maybe it's dissimulation, towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance, and displays in the most captivating manner the charming picture of candor, frankness, and sincerity while it is rioting in rapine and insolence, this country will be the most miserable habitation in the world. Let me stop right there, because I've already used a word you've probably never heard before. The word is R-A-P-I-N-E, and it's pronounced rapine. Now, that word does not mean what you might think it means. The word originally meant the forcible seizure and carrying off of the property of another, like the smash and grab robberies we hear so much about today. And to be more specific, it is an old-fashioned word for concepts like plunder and pillage during war, and especially during invasions. Now, let's pick up where I left off. This country, says Adams, will be the most miserable habitation in the world because we have no government armed with powers capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion, avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest chords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Unquote, John Adams. Now let's do a thought experiment, shall we? Haven't we come to that precise pass? Don't our so-called leaders today assume the language of justice and moderation while practicing iniquity and extravagance, and display in the most captivating manner the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity while, well, you get the idea. I don't want to use that word again. Here's the thing. The only difference between a Rachel Maddow and the kind of leader of which John Adams was warning is that she has lost her charm. I mean, she is without a doubt the most cheerless schoolmarm on television today. But others are experts at using nice-sounding words for policies that literally amount to highway robbery and other things that don't bear mention in polite company. This is why we must become a moral and religious people once again. Now, before I get into how America fell away from that idea of Christian governance, I want to shout out to another sponsor, BitNext. This is your replacement for Zoom, Slack, the Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and Chili Piper, among others. Unlike any of them, BitNext protects your content and conversations so well that even the administrators can't see it. So, this is your channel for secure comms, conferencing, cloud storage, and file sharing. Best of all, everything is back-end, so you don't even need client software. If you have a browser, you can use BitNext. Follow the link and give them a try. 28 days free of charge. Can't beat that with a stick. Okay, back to American history. Beginning in 1875 with James G. Blaine, America fell away from that ideal of Christian governance. Before him, different states did establish state churches. I put it to you that no harm came from that practice. Now, if any of you listeners think that any harm did come, leave a comment. Anyway, James G. Blaine wanted to discriminate against Catholics, who, among other things, had their own schools. Hence, Blaine Amendments. Now in 37 states, Louisiana rescinded its Blaine Amendment in 1974. After that came many bad Supreme Court precedents that only solidified the establishment of atheism as the official American anti-religion. Besides establishing atheism, those precedents gave support to the notion that the second coming of Christ would happen very soon. that prospect was the subject of several literary and dramatic projects, especially in the late 1990s. Maybe you heard of some of them. Left Behind, a 12-novel series of the last days, and The Gathering, a short film that came out in 1998. But in the 2021 term, the Supreme Court has repudiated some of the worst of these precedents. 3 cases in particular give me a clear signal that God has proclaimed a season of further restraint of the lawless one. You'll find mention of him 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Those cases are Carson versus Macon, 20-1088, which thoroughly repudiated all Blaine amendments and Blaine laws as unconstitutional on their face. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, 19-1392. That's the one that overruled the infamous Roe and Casey precedents. And Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, 21-418. That repudiated Lemon versus Kurtzman and the infamous Lemon test. Of the 3, I pick Carson as the most important, because that tells the government that it may no longer establish atheism. Now, of course, even this Supreme Court is reluctant to opine specifically for Christian governance. Indeed, in his concurrence in Dobbs, Justice Brett Kavanaugh specifically disclaimed any authority for what he called the unelected members of this court to establish moral results. But other elected officials and candidates have properly held forth for Christian governance. They include Representatives Lauren Boebert from Colorado and Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. Lauren Boebert, of course, said explicitly, and I quote, "The church is supposed to direct the government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it," unquote, Lauren Boebert. Marjorie Taylor Greene goes further, defending Christian governance explicitly. I have a link in the description to a tweet containing video of her saying a few words. And now I'm going to quote some of those words directly. "This movement will actually be the movement that stops the school shootings, stops the crime in our streets, stops the sexual immorality, and teaches children and brings them up in traditional families and loving homes. This will be the moment that protects kids' innocence and nurtures them into responsible adults who grow up to be successful moms and dads," unquote, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, who could oppose that? Especially since it covers not only laws, but precepts for good home life and the moral instruction of children. Well, evidently, a nominally Baptist legal society, which goes by the initialism BJC, shies away from Christian governance. I have a link in the description to this tweet from Amanda Tyler, the head of the BJC. Listen to this. "Christianity and Christian nationalism should never be conflated, and a growing number of Christians are joining the Christians Against Christian Nationalism campaign to speak out about this harmful ideology." Harmful? To whom? And then she goes on, "As Christians and as Americans, we must reject Christian nationalism and hold our elected officials accountable when they endorse it." Excuse me? Let me tell you something. I hold elected officials accountable for rejecting it, considering how it solves a lot of problems they say they care about. And I'm not alone. The next day, one John Carpenter asked quite reasonably what BJC would propose as an alternative. I have a link in the description to what he said, and I'm going to quote him now. "Secular or pagan nationalism? Christian globalism? Now there's a contradiction in terms. Or secular or pagan globalism? Now that fits better. His point is power, spiritual and other kinds, abhors a vacuum. So, where are we? As I said earlier, God has proclaimed a further season of restraint of evil and perhaps delayed the second coming. Now I say perhaps because setting dates always presents a hazard. The late Harold Camping set a date for the end of the world 11 years ago, and he was dead within 48 hours of the world missing his deadline. Now, why God chose to hold up the second coming, if that's what he did, I will not speculate, except to say that maybe he in his wisdom believes that patriotic Americans re-embracing the ideals of Christian governance will be better recruiters. In any event, Andrew Torba, in his written response to Rachel Maddow, correctly tells Christians, especially men, to fight. And not only to fight, but to fight to win, especially now that the Supreme Court has changed the game. The day of carving out a private space for the expression of religious belief is over. Christians need not stand by while non-Christians claim unlimited license to lie, cheat, and steal, and arguably claim another kind of license from which the Supreme Court, in the Dobbs case, removed 49 years of judicial protection. Those who agitate for that kind of license say it will be limited, but for how long? But I digress. So, what will a Judeo-Christian civilizational state look like? Well, perhaps it will have blue laws, mandating that people do give commerce a rest 1 day per week. Certainly it will distinguish between adults and minors, and protect minors from certain unwholesome exposures. While the law can allow certain adult pleasures, these must not come at the expense of the exploitation of minors, or contributing to their delinquency, or compromising their innocence. And the Constitution will recognize life, the greatest gift of all, as a right. Link in the description of the article to Andrew Torba's video response to Rachel Maddow, to the John Adams letter to the Massachusetts militia, to Marjorie Taylor Greene's video, to the BJC response to John Carpenter's rebuttal, and to Conservative News and Views. I have another link to the awesome online store and to BitNext, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video. I'm going to leave a subscribe link on the end screen, and also a link to a brand new playlist containing things like covering things like a civilizational state, those 3 Supreme Court precedents, and Lauren Biebert's rebuttal of separation of faith and state. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.